Welcome to the Production Talk podcast with me, Jan of mixartist.com.au. In this podcast series, we celebrate the modern way of producing music. We want to talk about all things related to songwriting, recording at home, and music production. So if you produce your music at home, this is the place to be. Please subscribe and recommend this podcast to all your friends. This is the Production Talk podcast, episode 62. Welcome back to another episode of the Production Talk podcast. At the beginning of this episode, as always, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country that the following interview is recorded on, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today is a special day. We have another interview going, this time across the pond between Australia and Europe, Hamburg and Germany to be specific. And with me today is Mr. Chris HARMS of Lord of the Lost. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jan, for inviting me, and good to seeing you again, digitally at least, after I think 16 years of
something like that.
Of just writing emails back and forth. Yeah, crazy.
That's right. So we're on the other side of the world, and we haven't seen each other for such a long time. So I've been in Australia since 2006. So I think, were you there at the goodbye party? We had drinks together, didn't we? Were you there on that night or the night before? I know that I have a photograph of you and
I'm sure
hugging
I was there,
bye-bye, and I had the backpack, and I was literally about to hit the road to go to Australia.
I remember being on some goodbye party with you, but I don't remember where it was actually. Do you remember?
I wouldn't be surprised if all our memories were a little bit vague here. That would explain things.
Do you remember how that was?
I think we went to a pub by the name of Down Under first, and then we went to various places on Reeperbahn, and eventually, people sent me off, and I went to the train station and buggered off and started new life in Australia.
I just had to think about you a couple of days ago because I drove by the old building where I actually met you first at SAE Institute, where you've been my teacher. And this old building has just been torn down a couple of months ago.
Oh, really?
So it's gone. It's
gone.
Vanished.
Oh, wow.
So I just thought like how many amazing people I met there, and you're one of them. And I learned a lot from you there. And that actually everything I'm doing right now, artist-wise, most of the people I work together with for years now, everything started there. Even members of my band I met at students of mine later.
Wow.
So, fucking crazy. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, music, it's this family where things can happen, and it's just unbelievable. Look, I haven't seen you for such a long time, and you've come such a long way. So just to spoil the punchline for everybody, you've just returned from a huge tour all across Europe, playing with Iron Maiden. Is that right?
That's right. We played 18 shows in 16 countries.
Wow!
Within 2 months. And in the middle
I saw some photos, and wow!
Yeah, in the middle we played 10 festivals in between Maiden shows and some headliner shows, which were obviously smaller. It's unbelievable.
When you say smaller, are we talking 300 people or 400 people? What do you mean?
Smaller, like Lord of Lost audience is from, it depends where we are. If we are at the end of the world somewhere in China, then we are lucky when 200 people come. And if we play in Germany or Finland or not anymore at the moment, but Russia, we play in front of 1,000, 2,000 people sometimes. So
nice.
But that's smaller compared to Iron Maiden, of course, much, much smaller, because
of course
the smallest venue we played with Maiden was 20,000, I think, and the biggest was 65,000. So
wow. That's just ridiculous. Oh wow.
I mean, not everyone was there already when we played, because obviously we played earlier. But the
come on,
stadiums
don't play it down.
No, the stadiums were already filled like 50 to 80%. And there was an Australian band with us also, Airborne.
Oh, cool.
They were with us for like 8 or 9 shows. So on some shows we were 2 support bands. So yeah. And very, very nice guys, or very nice lads, I should say. And yeah, I like them a lot. So.
Look, Chris, a long time ago, now we worked together. You had several different bands going, productions going, and for a couple of shows, I was your live sound engineer. And I remember we played a show together. Was it Große Freiheit in Hamburg? I'm not quite sure. It might have been that one. And I think
with another band.
Yeah, we had not that many people there. You know, it was like 200 people. I'm not even sure how many.
Maybe 90.
Yeah, really? All right. And that's a big venue. So, those were different days when, you were a musician at the beginning of your career and, building. And now you're on the other end. Just give me a couple of the big milestones. What have I missed? What happened in between?
All right. I mean, like when you left Germany in 2006, I was still in the middle of like kind of searching where I wanted to go, trying things with different musical projects. And then just 1 year later, I met my wife, who's now my wife. I met her in Berlin, and all these feelings that come up when you fall in love and stuff. It does so many things with you, and it was so inspiring. So I wrote this record, which did not fit into any of my musical projects. So I decided to start to record it alone on myself, and being a sound engineer and musician. And I could just do it. And that was the start of Lord of Lost. And of course, I can't go on stage alone. So 2 years later, in 2009, I had a live band and we started. And then there were some milestones in between, like our first big support tour with supporting a big German band in 2012. And then many things happened in between. Then we had a label change and went more international in 2018 and had our first top 10 German chart entry. Now the last record, Judas, went on top 2 in their official German album charts. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, at the same time, I found my way as a composer for other people, and also sound engineer and music producer. At the same time, I was still like lecturing at SAE Institute until 2019, I think. So I had my first gold records coming in and all these things. And crazy things happened step by step by, not giving up and working and never stopping,
Yeah, right.
So
wow.
And so this is I always have to laugh when people congratulate me to my overnight success, and then I'm like, if you're talking about a 20-year-long night, then thank you. So
yeah, well said. Yeah. So it is really not what people see from the outside, they just see on the big stage. But you've done your.
It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of what's the English word? Opfer? Damn,
sacrifice.
Yeah, lots of sacrifices. Yeah, lots of that most people do not see. And if you want to be rock and roll and true in the metal and rock scene, people expect you to eat shit and sleep on the floor and can't have any luxury. And as soon as you get there and you can afford your own hotel room, then you're like a sellout. So it's always funny to see. So, but fuck it. It's been a long way, and I'm proud of the things I have reached, because I know that I have worked for it, and I always worked with a great team. It's not my success alone. It's I always work together with people, and I am so thankful that I have all them to work together with them, because I could have never made it until here alone on myself.
Okay,
and I wouldn't have wanted.
Look, you mentioned this cliche of being, that starving musician, and part of this cliche is that, people who are at the beginning of the career and are not making, a good income yet, they're often faced by discouragement, by people who say, quit it, study, work at a bank, don't be a musician.
Yeah.
And, setbacks happen, did any of this happen to you? And if so, how did you get past it?
I had lots of setbacks, of course. So, on personal levels, things happen where you are doubting everything you do. And then, I don't know, you start a production with a band and they don't pay you, or they don't like what you did. And you, or you break up with band members and you just don't get forward. You can't make the numbers that the label expect. And you lose the label, you lose this, you lose that, people suing you for whatever. I had all these things. But there was not really an alternative. The only other thing that I liked was lecturing. I loved that. I loved that a lot. And when you left for Australia, I got actually all your lectures. So you gave me all the things that you lectured. So this is where it started to get really interesting, because you left and I could continue all your lectures, which like the signal flow for the big studio and all these things. And so this would have been my only alternative, like going more into lecturing. But maybe because I did so many jobs parallel at the same time, and I kind of still do. I just had to quit the lecturing. I still work as a musician and as a composer for others and as a music producer. I think that helped me, because I never just relied on one thing.
Okay.
But what I never did was to learn something, what my parents would have expected. So there was no alternative. Yeah, no. I never had any job interview anywhere. So I never had a boss, like a real one. Even at SAE Institute, we were freelancers, so... I can't compare, but I'm happy that I fought through it all these years. So
okay, wow. Have you got any advice for other younger musicians, less experienced musicians who are struggling with, this kind of self-doubt? What's the best way to deal with that and move on mentally? How do you deal with that?
What I always tried for me was two things. First, keep things interesting for me. So when I thought like I wanted to change, I always embraced the change. So when I felt like, hey, my band or whatever musical project is going in this direction, but maybe I feel more like going in this direction, I just did it. And I didn't wait. Not like waiting till the album is released and then 1 year later you start writing new songs or whatever. Finishing one record always meant like always writing the other one, and being open about creativity and about changes. And the second thing is being authentic. And I think both things go together, because when you always do what you love most, and if you allow yourself to be your biggest fan, which for me is not meant in an arrogant way, if you just be cool with you like your stuff most. Otherwise, why would you do something you don't like most? Like do the second best for you. Then you stay authentic. So embracing the change, and it helps you being authentic, and the other way around. And this is what I always did. So embrace the change, be fast. Don't wait, because some bands go like, yeah, now we found a label, we're releasing the album, then we go on tour, and then we sit together, and whoever comes up with the first idea for something next, then we're doing a second album. No one's gonna wait for you. If you're not Lady Gaga, who can wait like for 10 years and then she will go number one because people wait for her record. Or Iron Maiden, if you're not like on that level, people don't wait.
Yeah.
So don't stop. Don't like lie down because you just finished one song.
Don't wait for it.
No, don't wait for it. So
that's really good advice. Thanks, Chris. That's really good advice. I'd like to steer back to the touring life for a moment, if that's okay. Look, I meant to actually ask that asked that earlier, but can you please introduce your band members?
Yes, of course. We are a 5-piece band. I'm singing, so just let me start with me. So we have that off the table. I'm also playing guitar here and there on stage. My guitar is not needed, though. I play when I want, so because it's just fun. In the studio, I also do like programming jobs, and I'm a classical cello player, as you might remember. So I use that.
I do,
as well.
yes.
And
you do play cello on stage as well occasionally, don't you?
Yes, when we do acoustic shows, classical shows, I do that, and it's kind of it's not easy because like the voice and also the cello is a fretless instrument, like intonation, like two things at a time. This is kind of a tough job, but yeah. And then the other guys in the band, there's like the classical drum, bass, guitar, plus we have a keyboardist, so our guitar player.
What are the names?
P. His name is P or Pi, like the number 3.14. I met him as my SAE student like 7 years ago or something. We still had a different guitarist at that time, and so he joined after being done with SAE. He joined us as guitar tech on tour, and our old guitarist decided to get a real job and change his life and started working for Apple and turned away from music. So he went from guitar tech to guitarist, actually, in 2016. And then we have Nick, our drummer, is a drummer from the German metal scene, which I know for more than 12, 13 years or 10, or I don't know. And he joined the band in 2016 also. We needed a drummer change. And then we have, you might actually know him, Klaas on bass guitar. You might know him from Amptown in Hamburg or Just Music later. He worked there at the guitar, where SAE in Hamburg was then, at the bunker. We had the music store down there.
I do remember that place.
I think if you see him, you will remember him. He was one of the guys working
I'm not good with names, but I'm good with faces. Usually I recognize faces. My old guitar player, Tom Boons, used to work there. So they would know each other.
I'm sure you would recognize him. And I met him 20 years ago, and we got friends over the years. And at one time I asked him for a different musical project. Hey, do you want to join this band? He said, like, no, not right now. I don't have time. But next time you ask me for whatever band it is, I'm going to say yes. So in 28, I asked him, like, hey, I have this new band, Lord of Lost. Do you want to play? He said, like, yes. I don't know what it is, but I promised you to say yes. So he joined the band.
Oh, that's good.
Then we have Jared, who is a crazy musician. He plays all the instruments. He's got perfect pitch by birth, of course. And he's our piano player. And I also met him as a student in, I don't know, 2010 or something.
Wow.
Or 9. No, not 9.
Wow.
8. 8. He joined the band like in the very beginning. Yeah.
Wow. So, creative bunch.
Yeah.
So you're basically, bringing up your own musical family there in some ways.
Those guys are my best friends. They are my brothers, and I think this makes us strong as a band. And cool. Also the crew, and we don't make any difference between crew and band when we're on tour or in the studio. We're actually doing songwriting camps together for our records, like involving people of the crew. There's no hierarchy, like
wow.
That the crew is somehow lower than the band or that bullshit, which I sometimes see with other bands, which I fucking hate, because I think attitude is something which you should have on stage, but not off stage. Off stage, we are all the same.
That's a great thing to say. I love that. That's really cool. So how much crew do you have when you tour?
It depends. When we do overseas things, we can go very small with just sound, light, and maybe one for stage. And then we rent people from those countries because sometimes it's just not affordable.
Of course.
But when we're in Germany or like Central Europe and going with a nightliner, then we are like, we have a 5-piece band and we're on tour with all in all 12 to 18 people.
Wow.
It depends on how big the shows are. Sometimes you need 2 people for the merch, or for big festivals, you need 3 backliners on stage or 4 instead of 2. And so sometimes you need two bus drivers when the distances are getting longer. So average,
that's
like
a huge production. People. Wow, that's really big.
It is, yeah.
And Chris, you're welcome to ignore this question if you don't want to answer it. But I'm just curious, as a dad myself, how do you manage with family life and touring life? Is that difficult for you? Feel free to dodge this question if you're uncomfortable.
No, that's totally fine with me. My son is 11 now. And in the beginning, when he was a baby, it was only difficult for me because he didn't really recognize. And now it's like he's old enough to understand, and he understood one thing, and this is really important. And maybe it's even better for him having me as a dad than the typical 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 office dad, because when I'm in Hamburg, when I'm not on tour, which is more than half of the year, I only work when he's at school or when he's sleeping. So I always plan my studio days, with exceptions, of course. If we are, having Deep Purple in the studio or things like that, then I'm staying longer. But actually, I'm only working from like 8 till afternoon. And then later when he's in bed. So when I'm in Hamburg, it's always me who wakes him up in the morning, doing breakfast. Okay, meanwhile, he's doing the breakfast because he likes it. Then I pick him up from school if he wants to be picked up, because sometimes it's not cool anymore. And then we do things. So, or I take him to the studio. He knows many people from the bands that I'm producing. He loves that. He's a little drummer himself. So, and he understands that sometimes I'm gone, sometimes even for 4 weeks or longer. So he doesn't see me, then we can FaceTime or talk. But I never force him. I'm never making him miss me. Like, do you miss me? Let's talk tomorrow. I'm just waiting for him to come up, because sometimes for 5 days he doesn't even recognize, So I don't make him miss me, although I miss him terribly every day. But then when I come back on tour, I might be here for 7 weeks. And he's got me from the afternoon till he goes to bed.
Oh, wow.
So, I think both of us have understood that it might be even cooler than having the typical 9 to 5 or longer dad that comes home at 7 or later, sees the kids for half an hour, and then maybe on Sunday.
I think this is really impressive, Chris. You're living the dream, basically. This is the life that I literally want for me and my boy, and I'm guilty of working too much occasionally. So respect. Fatherhood, is a hard thing. It's not easy.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, and I'm aware.
There's something I can learn from you.
Well, I'm aware of that. I'm living the dream, so I'm not trying to reflect my dreams on my kid. I'm trying to, what many parents do. And also I'm not taking that for granted. So I know that I'm privileged. I know I worked hard for it, but I'm never complaining about my job, because I'm never complaining about fans showing up and recognizing me in the supermarket and these things. It's part of the job, it's what I chose. And I'd never complain, because that would be presumptuous. And, I'm thankful for what I have.
You have got such a good attitude around those things. That's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, with me and the listeners. That's fantastic. Look, if it's okay with you, I'd like to steer in a new direction. Can you talk us through sort of like a typical songwriting workflow? You've released so many records. I'm sure there's many differences, but if you had to draw up sort of like, the standard way songs come together from the rehearsal room to the studio.
That's the thing. There's no standard way, but I can tell you some scenarios. Like 2 hours ago, I was in the studio doing some edits, and then something came up, and I was like, there's some gibberish English. I don't know. I just go on the piano because I heard something in my head. It's like a radio playing in my head. And then I go there and in some gibberish, blah, blah, just record it. And if I like it 3 days later, I'm going to produce a demo.
Wow.
I stopped producing demos of everything I'm hearing because I let time be a filter. If I don't think it's important 3 days later, it wasn't a good song. This can be one thing. The other thing can be that I sit down with bandmates or people from my crew or people that I like, or my friend and studio colleague Eike, which you just interviewed a couple of weeks back. We wrote like 5 or 6 songs for Lord of Lost together. And we just sit down and someone comes in with an idea, or we start things from scratch, like what do we want to do today? And another thing can be like more people sitting together at a songwriting camp, which I like, that you go to a different place or you meet in the studio and for 3 days work on a project, and then you do 2 or 3 piece teams, and they change every day. So you put people together that might never have worked with. But this can be a different scenario. And maybe my favorite one is because I like to work alone, but I don't like to work alone. That means I start an idea. I have an idea. I start to do a demo because most things that I have in my head is like choruses, a chorus melody, the chords, and I like it, and the rest is missing. And then I give it to someone, to a bandmate or something, and then he does something. I get the session back, so we're sending things back and forth. Also overseas with people. Like in the digital times, we can do that. I could write a song with you, like playing, I called it ping pong. So we're doing ping pong songwriting. And I love that. And sometimes it's just ping and pong, and then the song is done. Sometimes you play a whole match over a couple of weeks, which I find extremely interesting. And I do that for 2 reasons. First is I just like it. Second, I really might get stuck. And if you switch off your ego, like, I just want my name in the credits, fuck it. It's about art. I started being a musician because I love music, is what I have to do. I didn't start it because I wanted the credits, you know? So sometimes I just get stuck, so I give it to someone. And I find it so inspiring. And the last scenario can be that someone is approaching me just for top lining. It means just the vocal melodies, which just happened like 2 years ago with a Czech band called Dimitri. They are super big in the Czech Republic. It's like there's the Czech Slipknot. They also have masks and stuff. And they asked me to do vocal lines, like top lines on their record. And today I just received the Czech Golden Record from them. So,
oh wow!
You know, I didn't write any of the songs, the instrumental bases. So they just sent me the instrumentals, and I just did my thing and did some arrangements and made demos also in gibberish English, and they wrote some Czech lyrics to it and used my melodies, not for all songs but for some. And this can be super interesting.
Cool. It's
also part of songwriting, but I was the last one in the chain. I didn't start it. Yeah. So I was the pong, not the ping. You know?
Yeah, right.
So.
Oh, that's cool. Look, just a practical question. When you say you ping pong the sessions forward and back, do you all work in the same DAW to make that work? Or do you exchange bundles of WAV files? Or do you use, in DAW collaboration features?
I don't do those collaborations features or cloud-based things. It's always too buggy for me, or like working in real time with audio taxi or things. I'm just always checking first, like on what are they working on, or what is my partner working on. And when they say like, hey, I'm working in Logic, which is my go-to for creative things, I wouldn't mix in Logic. I'm a Pro Tools guy. So, but just for creative things, I like Logic. And then they're like, yeah, let's use Logic. Let's just use the internal sounds. So then you're like 100% compatible.
Yeah.
If they go like, oh, but I need to work with Steven Slate drums, then I check if I have it, or I just buy it, and then we are compatible, you know. If someone's working on Studio One and we're like 3 people, the other one's working on Pro Tools and the other one on Cubase and maybe whatever, then we're just exchanging wave files and
right. And then you just agree on, you know, a common sample rate and the same timeline. I guess. Do you always start from the same start point?
You know, like working with musicians mean that most of them don't care about these things, so things get fucked up all the time. But
yeah, they do.
You know, in the end, it always works out somehow.
Creativity can be messy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Cool. All right. Look, and you're also a producer and, you know, recording engineer and record producer. Is that right?
Yeah.
How do you find time for all of this in addition to being, you know, full-time musician? That sounds like a very busy schedule.
First, like I use my calendar. So it's like, you know, it's just like
good point.
I don't find time planning that hard. If once you learn that you work with a buffer size which is big, like 30% or something, then I always get along with that. And
let me just break that down for a moment. So when you plan in your calendar, you add buffers.
Yes,
and therefore you always have time for the unforeseen, which eventually will happen.
Yes. And I those buffers
that is such a smart thing.
I have to, you know, like because
good.
And also some bands sometimes are even faster, but like I add buffers, and if I don't know the people, I try to estimate, or I start with like 25 or 30%. If I work with an artist a second time, then I know I might even don't need a buffer or need like 100%. And of course you can get sick or something. And the second thing is I outsource a lot. I'm a team player. I'm not a one-man show. So I say like for vocal tuning, it's always like I always ask Jared, our keyboardist in the band, with perfect pitch. He's so much faster than me. I just send him the sessions and go like, do it. So he gets paid by song. So this is what he's doing. Like all the beat detective things for drums or whatever, I outsource that. The only edits that I do as a producer is always vocal edit, because vocal edit for me is something that the producer has to do. I wouldn't ever outsource that. It's so
the compiling, you know, choosing the right bits for the golden tape.
Yeah, and also cleaning the consonants, so all the K's and T's and all, like the way I want it, and like choosing from the playlist the different takes. This is something I would never give to an intern, like an practicant. Intern,
or studio assistant,
or someone who's quite new. They can watch, they can check how I'm doing that, but this is what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm a team player, and I'm more comfortable when I'm producing a record, when I'm the executive producer from the outside, deciding things, being responsible for doing certain parts my own, and then outsourcing things. Like I have someone starting the mix, and then I come in with fresh ears at the end of the mix. You know, all these
that
things.
Makes sense.
This is why I can be involved within, I don't know, 5 to 15 album productions per year. I could not do this as a one-man show because I only have time for the studio, like, I don't know, 100 days a year.
Because you've basically got a team of specialists and they all have their responsibilities and you can delegate.
Yes, and you know, I have a team of, we are all generalists, which is a good thing, but we all can be a specialist for one thing, and like you be the specialist for drum editing for this production, you know. And I think this is also one of my superpowers. I am not perfect in anything, but I'm good in many things. I'm kind of good in many things, and compiling these things, like, I think this is. I like it that way. I wouldn't like to be perfect in just one thing, doing just the one thing all the time. So
yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
And never be afraid of asking people for help. Like always admit that you're not perfect for that. When someone comes like, when all these dubstep elements came in like 10 years ago or something. Don't be afraid to ask, like, how do I do this fucking wobble bass line? Just get someone for it. One of the kids that do that at home with Fruity Loops, Don't be afraid to let people in your team. So put your ego aside once again. Also as a producer, it helps a lot.
That's really good advice. I really like that. Do you also produce your own record, or do you get different producers in when it comes down to recording and finishing your mix?
I started doing all these things by myself. And then for our third album in 2012, I realized that I was better when I was mixing. Like, producing was fine, but when it came to post-production, mix and later mastering, I realized that I was better if I did it for other artists, because I was so... in Germany, we have the nice word betriebsblind.
How do you translate that?
How would you translate that?
You're just too close to it. That's what you're saying.
You're just too close to it.
You're right.
So the third Lord of Lost record I gave to Eike Frese for mixdown. And meanwhile, I'm always checking like in which direction is the album going. So I maybe just invite someone as a co-producer from the very beginning, because he comes from a certain angle or from certain sound aesthetics, which I would like for the record, and so on. So there's actually not a big difference, like if it's a Lord of Lost production or a different one. But I'm trying not to. Well, no, that's wrong to say that. I'm intentionally not doing everything on my own, because I know it's better if I'm not doing everything, because of being too close to it.
Yeah, right. So I guess that's the advice we can take from you, to not necessarily produce oneself if we can avoid it, and get other people to help out, because that is definitely a problem. I think it's the hardest thing. I find it myself. Look, editing a podcast, EQing my own voice is the hardest thing in the world for me.
Yeah,
EQing somebody else's voice is easy, but my own voice, it's always hard. So getting other people to do some of the work is, I guess that's do you struggle to trust people? Do you struggle to let go?
It depends on the people.
Of course.
There are people over the years which I fully trust, and I wouldn't even question. It's like we were in situations where I was on the road, and there was no opportunity for me to check a final master of a production I was involved in because of internet or whatever. Dropbox link didn't load, but we had to finalize it. But I knew that the guy who was doing it, this guy is Benny from my team, who's my closest production partner for 90% of everything I'm doing. I know if he says it's the way how you like it, I don't need your advice right now, we can send it, then I trust him. Because before I say it, most of the time he actually knows what my input would be anyway. So I don't have trust issues. I think I have the very normal thing, like when I meet new people, of course I want to trust them, but I just can't, because you need the experience. I think maybe trust is such a hard word,
It builds.
Yeah, I think.
It needs to build,
but
of course.
I can let go. I'm not a control freak, so it's it's not a sickness. I like things. I like things being controlled, but I like to know everything in detail and actually understand it. I'm the guy that looks up things in Wikipedia like every 20 minutes all day. So I want to know everything. But
you're like a sponge. You're just soaking up information.
With the right people, I can let go. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a really good thing. I think that's a healthy thing, because
it's
I guess
same
otherwise
thing,
it limits your growth if you can never let go.
You know, it's the same thing like with that podcast here. I wouldn't ask you to let me check it because I've known you for such a long time. I know you will make it sound right, and I know if you think that some things in the podcast sound weird or whatever, you edit them out yourself. So this is something I wouldn't check, you know.
Okay. Well, a podcast is one thing, but, you know, your own record obviously is, I guess, something like your own baby and something very personal. Let's just talk about the albums you've produced. Look, what I'm not interested in genres. I'm interested in music that takes me on a journey. That's what I learned about myself. That, you know, music that is sort of like static, stays in the same pocket for too long, bores me. And I always need things that have movement and surprises and get loud and get quiet. I haven't found that many bands that are so colorful in many ways. You know, Lord of the Lost is so unique in a way that I guess the genre is somewhere in, I guess it's metal. There's a bit of goth in there. There's definitely some industrial in there, but there's so much else in there. And then suddenly I go to Swan Songs and there's an orchestral piece without vocals that reminds me of the most amazing film score.
Yeah.
How do you come up with that? How can you be so colorful musically? Tell me more about, you know, where these ideas come from.
I think, like, you know, one thing what I said earlier, embrace the change.
Yeah.
So always try to sound different. Our Swan Songs, which for the listeners who don't know Lord of the Lost, is our acoustic ensemble or classical unplugged, call it whatever you want, version. We started doing that like 7 years ago or something, just taking metals, our regular songs, and putting them into classical versions with vocals, also released instrumentals, of course. So this is something like our internal side project, so to say. But first, embrace the change. You know, if you want to sound different. I can't tell you where it's coming from, and I think, like every band I know says we don't have one genre. I mean, I've never met a musician who's like, "What music do you do?" And he says, "Black metal only." That never happened. You know, it's like they always say like, "Yeah, we don't really fit in," and you know, but the other thing is, Don't give a fuck about what people might like. It sounds so arrogant, but you know, if you don't do what you would love most at that very moment, how can you be authentic?
Yeah.
You go like, okay, let's check Spotify numbers and our last hit singles and blah, and the song. We need this length and this key and this tempo. And if we analyze our YouTube clicks, our most blah, 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 blah. Then you do an album, which might be the most successful, but in worst case, you fucking hate it. So just do whatever you want. But back to your question, how we come up with these different things, I don't know. It just happens. Maybe it's just my musical taste. You know, same for me. What you just said. I don't care about genres. I don't care if it's pop or hip hop or metal or funk or goth or whatever. If a song moves me and makes me feel something, then that's enough for me. You know, I don't even need to know more things about the artist sometimes. Sometimes it's just a song that moves me, and I like it. And I don't care if it's true or not, or if I'm allowed to listen to it because the metal community might frown about it, or fuck it, you know. And if you're that open-minded about things, and if, you know, the most interesting thing about good songs is for me, I mean, good is relative, of course, but for me, a good song is a song which can be put into any genre. If a song works in any genre, then it means the base of the song is right. And there's always the same things. It's harmonies, there's rhythm, and there's melodies. Except for some genres. If you just have noise techno, then you might miss the harmonies, also the melodies. But you have these three elements maximum, plus lyrics, of course. And it doesn't matter if they are played by a string quartet or by a black metal band or by a German folks music brass band. They have low. Yeah, it's the same way. You or by a jazz band, you can have the same bass line played by a synthesizer, by a tuba, by upright bass, or by a distorted short scale black metal bass. It doesn't matter. So if the song is good, it works in any genre.
Yeah.
And this is what I find super interesting.
Well said.
That's why our songs also work in the classical outfit when we're doing our swan songs. And I can tell you how fucking great it is to stand in Leipzig, in Germany, in front of 2,500 people with like an 80-piece orchestra around you, playing your songs without any electric guitars. It's amazing.
Wow. That sounds phenomenal. Do you have any videos for that? Is there anything out there?
I can send you. It's like, it was 2013. It's a festival called Gothic Meets Classic with a K at the beginning and in the end, like German classic. And it was phenomenal.
Look, I would love to put a link to that video or embed that video into the show notes. So at the end of the episode, everybody, please go to the show notes, scroll down, and click on that video. I want to watch it. I think everybody should. That sounds just so exciting.
It was exciting,
nice one. I want to steer back to the studio for a moment. Just can you give us a rough idea how much time you spent in a studio to finish an album?
Not really, because it's impossible. It always depends on how many songs, what are my duties for the record, how much money is involved. Because like we had productions which lasted, 10 weeks. Like paid by a big major label with like everything, and now we need some classical elements and this, and then let's record a flute player in a tunnel, whatever, like, so it can be very big, and sometimes just bands come in and having everything reamped and drums programmed and just doing some vocals and chop and they don't have money for more than 1 week and you have to be done. So it can be super different. I'm open to all things.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to kind of level big productions with productions of of small bands, young people that don't have any money, and always try to kind of do both.
And for your records, is all the music coming from the studio, or do you also sometimes take work home and do, keyboards at home or some extra guitar layers or so, and return it back to the studio?
That's always happening. Ping-ponging, and there's always those 2, 3, 4, 5 tracks. Wait, give me a second. There's 2, 3, okay. There's 2, 3 or 5 tracks. Not tracks, single tracks from a session that remain from the demo.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's the same thing. You did something for the demo. You can't recreate the feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, like lots of like overdub guitars and just effects and like programmings I do at home. I don't have to drive all through Hamburg to the studio and back and lose, 1 hour of my time in the car for just like pushing MIDI notes around. I do that at home or on tour or wherever. Which I like. I like being creative on tour, or like just being productive, like doing edits, vocal edits. I just need headphones and a mouse and Pro Tools, And for our upcoming record from Lord of Lost, which will be coming, I can't tell you when, but later, maybe next year, maybe this, we don't know. We wanted to have the magic that bands feel when they enter a studio for the first time. So I'm working in a very big studio in Hamburg, but I don't feel that magic. That's my day job. I go there.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, at 4:00, I need to be home. I pick up my son, and then I do this, and then I need to call my tax account, and then I have to go to the dentist tomorrow. Then there's no magic. I go there, and I see these bands coming in my studio all the time, and they're like, wow, whoa, I wanted that. So we decided in March or April this year, we went to Finland to a studio which produced like many, many great bands, like, Amorphous, Nightwish, and all these bands, all these big Finnish bands, which has this magic. And when I read this studio name on records, earlier on my own, like, I want to go to that studio. So we booked that studio. We went there for 2 weeks. We didn't fly. We drove there with our gear. So we had time to actually go there, take our gear, have this class trip feeling. So we went there with my studio crew, plus the whole band, and we booked us the greatest people working for us. Like our drum tech for tuning the drums was the ex-drummer of the band Him, a band I listened to as a teenager,
Wow.
So,
Yes.
And we went into the studio, which was Sonic Pump Studios in Helsinki, amazing facilities. And we got there like, wow, and we had that feeling. And I hope this feeling can be heard on the record then later.
Fantastic. Look, is there such a thing like, too much time in a studio? Is there like, a certain workflow speed that is ideal for you?
Oof, yeah,
can it get too tedious? Can it get too tedious or frustrating in studios as well when there's too much time involved?
No, not with me. I'm very fast because I can decide things just out of my stomach. Like if it feels right.
Good.
I'm not the kind of guy who does not get finished. I know people like remember Axl Rose and Chinese Democracy didn't finish the record for 14 years or something. Couldn't ever happen to me. If it feels right, I'm fine. I'm happy to let go at a certain point because I know that, of course, 1 year later, I would have done things differently. 10 years later, I would have done things differently. But it's not things I regret because 10 years later, you would have done everything differently. Yeah. I wouldn't have tribal tattoos on my arm. This was cool in the late 90s, but I don't regret them because I loved them back then. It's a part of me. Yeah. Same with music. If I wait until forever to get finished, I will never be happy about anything in my life. So, I'm
Chris, these
fast.
are really, really wise words, and a lot of people need to hear that because I know, as a matter of fact, how many people are struggling to finish their own work, and so many people work today just by themselves at home and on their computers, and they don't have teams like you have or the wisdom of knowing how to finish. And that can be really
I know
frustrating.
people that work on a 5-track EP for 4 years now, and meanwhile they hate these songs.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't just like put them out as long as you love them.
That's it. That's it. You just nailed it. I couldn't have said it any better. Cool, man. I think it's about time that we start wrapping things up. If people want to find out more about you and your band, where should we send them to? Have you got a website that you would like to mention? Or social channels?
We're on all social media, but we have them all linked on just lordofthelost.de, German website. There's a link to all our social media things. But, whatever you like, Spotify, YouTube, wherever, like we're everywhere. So no problem to find us.
Fantastic. Look, I'm going to put the links, of course, into the show notes. So again, just get to the end of it, scroll down and click it and find out more.
Sure.
Just a couple of last things. You briefly mentioned that we might be able to see you in Australia. Is that something that you can comment on?
Yes, I can. Nothing is confirmed already, and COVID and blah blah blah. But we have been working on Australian shows for 2020 already. Then Corona happened, so we are actually discussing shows with an Australian promoter for sometime early 2023 is next year, right? Yeah, 2023. And
yes.
Yeah, we don't know. Many things can be in the way still, but
of course.
I mean, no one really knows us there. It will be like super small concerts with like maybe 100 people, but I love these things. We did the same thing when we first went to China or when we first went to the US in 2014, like having a road trip. And again, I must say, we started doing music because we love music. If you only do music for the numbers, then you're lost anyway. So it's about the adventure. And we would even pay money to do a tour in Australia just because it's the thing we love, you know.
Yeah, cool.
we
Wow.
do earn money with different things. I wouldn't pay money to give people T-shirts, you know. I need to earn money from selling merch, but playing Australia, of course. Yeah.
Wow. Look, please keep me posted. I think that's super exciting, and I will definitely be there. So let's catch up. You know, if you play in the area on the East Coast, I'll be there. Definitely. It would be so nice to actually see you in person one day. Just the very last question before we finish up. Did I notice something on social media? Did you send any mail to the Pope?
Yeah, we did.
What was that? What was in it?
Someone in the band came up with a funny idea to do sex toys as merch. So we have these paperweights produced, which some people might think they are butt plugs, and and one of the butt plugs has my face on it, and not butt plugs, paperweights. Sorry, paperweights. And a friend of mine and I came up with the theory that the Catholic Church, if they might be more open to paperweights and other office supplies like that, there would be less sexual abuse within the ranks of the Catholic Church. So I thought I'd just send a little package to the Vatican, to the Pope himself. Maybe it helps.
You guys are crazy. All right. This is probably a good time to call it a day.
Yeah.
I know that your time is about up. So thank you so much for all of this. I really appreciate you making the time. And what you shared with us is just pure gold. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Cheers, mate.
Looking forward to share the link to our fans. And I think they'd love to listen. Hello, guys, if you listen now, right?
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Chris, my friend, it's been an absolute honor to catch up with you again, and I had a great time chatting to you. You've shared so much amazing knowledge, and I really appreciate all the secrets and, all the wisdom that you just shared with us. And I'm still absolutely baffled just by how well you're doing musically, and your career is really inspiration for all of us. At the end of this episode, we have another little story to share, because after the interview we kept chatting, and Chris and I remembered that in 2004 we were up to some shenanigans in Hamburg when we went to a place by the name of the Old Elb Tunnel, which is a very unique place in Hamburg. It's an old tunnel under the Elbe River, which ends on either side under a huge dome in some kind of a 24-meter deep lift cage where they transport cars up and down, leading to a 400 or over 400 meter long tunnel under the river. It's quite an unbelievable structure, hard to imagine, so you really got to see it. So Chris and I dragged some drums into these tunnels in the middle of the night, and we annoyed some of the pedestrians there, but we got some recordings done with me on the drums just hitting it and Chris doing some recordings. And I completely forgot about these recordings until Chris and I started chatting again. And then I went through my files, and I actually found a file almost 20 years old, which is quite fantastic. And then I reached out to Chris again about that file, and it turns out that Chris actually also had a copy of the file, and it ended up being a part of one of the Lord of the Lost songs by the name of Free Radicals. It's some kind of a B version or so. I'm going to put the link into the show notes, of course, so check out the song. And to make it even more fun for everybody, Chris and I agreed to make this drum loop publicly available. It's a phenomenal sounding drum loop with heaps of reverb, natural reverb from this space. So the drum loop is available for you to download in the show notes. Head over there. You can work with the same source material that a lot of the Lost produce their song-free radicals with. So if you use it, it's free for you to use. You don't need to ask for permission, but please credit Lord of the Lost and also mixartist.com.au and tag us if you release any music with this beat. Okay, this is an extra little present for all of you. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating for this episode. And I would really love if you could also recommend this podcast series to all your musician friends. If you would like to reach out to me directly, you can of course do so via my website mixartist.com.au, where I offer studio recording sessions on the east coast of Australia and of course online mix down services for everyone worldwide. It's mixartist.com.au. Okay, that's all for today. Get ready for another amazing episode next week when I'm going to speak to one of Australia's most successful musicians of all times. This is all for today. Please subscribe and share this podcast. Bye for now.